Hello everyone, welcome back. My name is Patrick and this is CodeExpect channel. In the last time we have talked a lot about testing. Therefore, without further ado, let's dive in and actually write some unit tests. Let's then switch to PHP Storm and talk about the functionality of our module. Let's imagine that you want to export your order to an external service when the certain conditions are met. That's why there is a class called order publisher and the publish method. It receives an order instance, so we can check if the conditions are met and then publish this order to a queue that will process a message and export this order to a certain service. We don't need to send every field that is stored inside of the order instance. We just need a couple of those fields. That's why we'll create another variable that will store a data instance with only fields that we need for our scenario. So in the API data directory, there is an interface called order event data interface. Here there is a definition of constants, increment ID, also order status that we need for our export, and getters and setters. This interface is implemented by a class stored in the model data directory. It is called order event data. This class extends the data object, which is the Magento framework class that defines the get data and set data methods. Therefore, we can easily store some data inside of this object without actually implementing anything. I think we can now switch to the test class and start implementing our feature. Let's go to the test unit model directory, and in here there is a test class called order publisher test. Let's go in here and you can see that this class extends the test case, which is the class from the PHP unit framework, and also there is a protected function called setup. Setup is also specifically used in the PHP unit framework, and it's used to creating new instances to basically set up our test cases. To test our class, we need to create it first. So let's create an attribute in this class, which will be called order publisher, and create it by using the keyword new, order publisher. So normally in Magento 2 we should use object manager to instantiate new objects, but in unit tests we need to create a fresh instances. We shouldn't use object manager. We specifically need to define what dependencies we need to use in order to use the order publisher class. So order publisher class has the three dependencies, which is publisher interface. This is the class that will be used to publish the message to a queue. Scope comping interface, we'll use it to check if the export is enabled in configuration of Magento. We will of course not implement it in Magento per se. We will just use it for the test case that we want to implement. And order event data factory, this is a class that is responsible for creation of new instance of order event data that will be later exported. Let's switch to our test class and implement the constructor first. So when we are in unit testing space, remember, we want to test our code in isolation. We don't want to use other services, other dependencies, classes, and so on. That's why we need a way to simulate behavior of other classes. So for example, if our order publisher class uses publisher interface to publish some data to a queue, we need to simulate this behavior. So we know that publisher interface has a publish method and it receives topic name and data variables. This way we can write our mock instance of publisher interface. We can configure it so that in our test case this publisher interface behaves as we configured it to do. In order to create a new mock, we need to use API from the PHP unit framework. So let's create a new attribute that will be core publisher, and there is a method create mock. As a parameter, we need to select the class that we want to mock. So in our instance, this will be publisher interface. Let's put it here. Also, we need scope config interface. Let's just copy that and put it also here. And we also need order event data factory. So let's also put it here and just change the names of those attributes. So config and order event data factory. Or we can put it also in the constructor. So this core publisher, this config, and this order event data factory. So right now you can see that PHP Storm is not highlighting that there is something wrong with the order publisher constructor. It's actually working this way. Now let's create a new method that will test our order publisher test. So we use public function. We start with the test as the prefix of the method. And there are different conventions of naming test cases. I prefer to use the template that is, we start with the test and the name of the method that you want to test, which in our case is publish, then the state of the word, let's say. So for example, order placed, and then what we expect from this test. So what we expect is that this order is published, so we can just set order is published. I guess it all depends on the project that you are in, but I personally prefer to use this approach to name test cases. So the method that we want to test in the order publisher, the state of the word, and also the expected result. Okay, so now let's use this order publisher to publish order data, but we do not have order data created yet, right? So we need to create firstly an order that will be passed to the publish method. We can prepare it, but we need to have this order. How to do it? We need to have instance of order interface. That's how it is defined in the signature of the publish method. So we need order interface. So we also need to create a mock for it. Let's get back and create, let's just copy this line, create a new attribute called order, and create order interface mock. So this way, if you want to pass this, we will need to implement, or maybe not implement, we will need to configure this mock for every method that we want to use. So order instance will have methods like setters and getters. So because we created a mock for it, we would need to define the set data, get data methods, which will be a little, maybe not hard, but will be cumbersome, right? So that's why we can create partial mocks. Create partial mock, and we can define what methods of this class we want to configure later. So if we put an empty array here, this will mean that this will create a mock, but we could use all the methods that are in this order, in the order instance. So this way, for our purposes, we will do not make anything special. We will just get data from the order instance so that we can publish some data later, right? So we can use this order right now and use just set data method. This way we don't need to do anything. With the create partial mock, we have created a mock that will actually do something still useful. If you want to, for example, create a partial mock and you want to mock some, for example, set increment ID, you would need to specify this method in this array. If you do not do that, it will not work. Just remember that. Let's get back and set data, right? So let's put some data here. We need to put an array, and we will put status, which will be, let's say, processing, and other field will be increment ID, which will be just some random string, right? Random ID. So now that our order is created, we can correct that. It actually will pass this order. So now that our order is created and it's passed to the publish method, we need to configure a mock that will publish order data to a queue. So that's why we'll use this core publisher attribute instance, and we need to configure a mock. How to do it? We can start by using the method or expects, and we can see it, as you can see, because core publisher was created by the create mock, and therefore it's no longer only the publisher interface, but it's the PHP unit mock object builder invocation stubber. So that's why we have new methods here. We not only publish but others. So we can start with method or with the expects. We'll start with the expects. I prefer to use it. Expects, this method, we configure how many times we expect that this class will be triggered. So in our case, in our test case, we expect that this class will be only triggered once. That's why we configure once. If we want to define that this will be triggered a couple of times, we can put any, or we can specify, for example, at least required invocations, never. So it depends on the scenario. For us, it will be once. Then we will use method, and we need to configure a mock for the publish method. You can even see that PHP Storm is suggesting that there is a publish with topic name and data. So let's just say publish. We know that there is publish, and now we need to define what will happen if the method publish is called, is triggered. So we have a couple of options. For example, we'll return a value, we'll return argument, callback, reference, self, and so on. So we can define with it what we want to do. So we can go to a publish method, and we can see that it's either returning mixed value or null. We do not expect to get anything from this publish. We don't expect anything to be returned. So how we can test if the topic name and data that are set in our order publisher here are correct. So we can use will return callback. This way we can define a callback that will be called if the function publish is called, and we can have access to a data, to arguments that are passed to the publish method. This can be used for other scenarios, but in scenarios when you need to take some data from, for example, this method doesn't return anything and you need to somehow check if this worked or not, you need to basically, I guess, use this will return callback. So how to use it? Let's just create a function here with topic name and data. So this will be enough. So we will store our result data in a global attribute. So this will be called protected, let's say, array result data. And this will be stored in here. So topic name, we'll just assign it here, and data here, right? So after publishing, right? So let's maybe start over. So we create order, right? We create a mock for it. We need to do it before calling our method that we want to test. So the core publisher is configured. We call the publish method, and right now, if the publish method is called, our data will be returned in the callback in here. So we could store it, and after calling the method that we want to test, we can assert if the data is correct. So we can assert if this assert equals this result data, and for example topic name. So this will be for now, and let's say this will be test Q. So we don't have any specific Q in mind, so we will just use a test Q topic. Okay, so test case is prepared, and now what we need to do in the DDD approach, we need to run it and expect that it will fail. So let's just run unit tests, and it should be failed, yes. When there is call to undefined method, okay, right, so this is something else than we should get. Instead of having order interface, we need to use order class, because order interface doesn't have the set data method and it cannot be mocked. So let's run it again. We should get different error. Undefined array key topic name. Exactly. So there is no result data because core publisher wasn't called. So there is an error that we right now need to repair. So let's get back to order publisher and let's fix this. So let's use this publisher to publish, and we will use the test Q topic name that is expected in our class. And for now, let's just pass order. We will later use the order event data. We'll pass this order instance. Let's try again. And it's green. That's really great. It's the first test case in our journey that is green, so that's really exciting. Let's get back to the test class again, and right now we will so we don't want to pass the order instance, we want to pass the order event data, right? So let's prepare it right now. We won't do it in the publish method first, because remember, we are using the TDD approach, so we need to do it firstly in the test class, right? Let's then think then on what we expect to get when we call the publish method, right? We expect to get the order event data with the increment ID and the status that was passed from the order, right? This is what we want. So we need to write it down right here. Let's copy this line and we will use data. So let's maybe put it in variable first. So this will be order event data. And order event data, maybe we can even create, so basically we can define the class, because PHP Storm doesn't know what is inside of this variable. So let's just event data interface. This way we will be having these suggestions. So get order status and get increment ID. This is what we want. Order status will be processing, and increment ID will be this ID, right? So this is what we expect. And now if we run it, of course, this will be red. Exactly, it's red. The processing status, you see, filed asserting that tool matches expected processing. So of course, it's not yet set. So let's fix it. Let's get back to a class, order publisher, or maybe we can even try to split so we can have it alongside, right? This will be, I guess, easier. Okay, so we need to create order event data. So let's just do it. This order event data, it's a factory, so it has a method create order event data, right? And we can set order status and set order increment increment ID. Right, so we just get data from the order instance, which is get increment ID, and order get status. And that will be it. Of course, we need to order event data. We need to pass it instead of an order. So we have order, we create a new instance of order event data, and we pass it to a publisher. Let's run the code again. Okay, and you see that we have an error, call to a member function set order status on null, which means that this variable is null. So our order event data factory didn't create a new instance. And why is that? It's because we have a mock of an order event data factory. And in order to make it work, we actually need to configure this mock to create new instance of order event data. So why? Order event data factory is a class that is generated by Magento. This is something that is done like automatically, right? And in here you have other dependencies. So for example, you have object manager interface, which has other dependencies and so on. That's why we cannot just create a new instance like with order publisher, right? Because this will be really hard to do. We need to somehow create a new instance, right? So we can just configure the create method, but we do not need to configure it in each single test case. We can just do it in the setup method. So let's just configure it. Let's go and copy that, this order event data factory, and we will use again will return callback. This will be used because with this way we can create a new instance of a class, or even we can try using just will return. Let's just use it. So expects, we don't need to use this, but we can also use this and just specify any, but for the simplicity let's just remove it, and we'll go method create, and now we'll return, and we can just order event data. We'll create a new instance of order event data. So we can do it by will return, but okay, I was thinking we can do it by doing will return callback. So we could do it also by just doing this, right? So we have a couple of options here, but of course having this as with will return, it's a lot of simpler. Don't you agree? I guess it should work. So let's run tests again. Yeah, exactly, it worked. Awesome. And I don't know if you feel the same way as me, but every time I get this green green notification, I am so relieved, I am so happy. So this is also, I guess, a benefit of using a TDD approach and also tests as a whole. So great. Let's continue then. So now that it works, we can either create or implement new feature, right? We can add it something, or we can refactor our code. And while we are refactoring, we are sure that we didn't break, right? Because we have tests. That's so awesome about TDD. So for example, I want to have this in a separate method, right? So of course this is not let's say critical or complex refactoring, but let's create a new method here. So let's call it create event, or just create create event data. We can even pass it right away here, right? So we can just remove it and we have a simple data here, right? Okay, so let's run tests again. Refactored, it worked. Awesome. Now we can add new features, right? So let's focus right now on configuring the mock for a config. because what I want to show you. So let's practice again the mocking of the other classes. So we want to check if the configuration for exporting is enabled. So how we can do it? We can do it by using the scope config interface to get a configuration from a database. So there is a method called get value. So we'll just pass some sample path, and we will get either true or false, and therefore we will decide if we want to publish or we don't want to publish. Again, we need to firstly do it in test case. So this test case is let's say done, right? It works. So we will create a new one, and we will name it test publish config is disabled and order is not published. Okay, so what we need to do, let's start with configuring the mock for the config. Let's just check. Yeah, config, it's named this way. Config expects once method get value, and it will return false, right? So the config will return that the get value is false. So this is done. We can leave, so we need to pass something to the publish method, right? So this can be left, but because the config is disabled, this publisher won't be published, right? This publish method won't be triggered. So this way we don't need that because this will not be called, right? But we can also test if something wasn't called, right? We can use the never method, and this way if something happens and somehow this publish method is called, is triggered, these assertions will be shown as failed in the PHP unit, right? So it's also some additional security for ourselves. Of course, we do not, we cannot assert anything because nothing will be saved into the result data array. So we can just remove it, right? And we just rely on the expects never, right? And this is, and also that this config is called once. So let's run again tests. So the first test should be still green, exactly, because we haven't changed anything. And the second test case is failed because what was not expected to be called, you see? So the publish was not expected to be called. So how we can repair this? We need to implement if condition. So if this config get value some test path, let's say, doesn't really matter because it will be never taken from database. If this is not true, we just return, right? We don't want to do anything. And if this is true, then let's publish the order even data. Let's run again. Okay, and the first one, you see order undefined array key topic name. Okay, why is that? Okay, it's because we need to also define true value, right? We need to configure, right, because if there is null, this also will not be called. So that's why, sorry, we need to just make it true. And now it should be all green. Yeah, exactly. So we just forgot about it. So config is true, we publish, config is false, we do not publish. Great, awesome. Some additional thing that I want to show you, in PHP unit, there is a method called this assert expect exception. So this is also frequently used in case when you throw an error, throw an exception, and for example in the bad scenario. So for example, in our scenario, we can check if the order has status different than we expect, and in case if it's true, then we can just throw an exception. So if we throw an exception and we do not use this expect exception, our test case will be failed every time, because it's exception, so PHP unit doesn't recognize it, right? If it's true or if it shouldn't be or should be, right? It doesn't know this. So let's maybe create a new method for it. We will call it test publish again. Status is wrong and exception is thrown, right? So we will validate our order after this configuration check, so we need to make it true. We need to leave this data, right, because we need to change the status, right? We need to change status, so we will just make as error. Increment ID can be like this, and right now this will be never used, so we can remove it, and we can use expect exception message, right? So we can just put, for example, a message, right? Order has wrong status, right? So we expect that there will be an exception message, right? That you can also like check if the exception, so you can actually create a exception instance, code, or even message regex and so on. So it depends on what you want. For our cases, this will be enough to check if the exception message is thrown. Okay, so of course we run tests again. Two, the first and the second is green, and the third one is failed. So why? Failed are asserting that exception with message order has wrong is thrown. Okay, so what we need to do, we just need to check if order gets status. We can either check if error, or let's say if it's not processing. So we only want to send processing orders, right? If it's not processing, we throw new let's say localized exception, and this is something from Magento, and we'll just call it order has wrong status. Let's run tests again and see if that worked. And all is green. That's a perfect scenario. Everything is working and we have a really nice code, right? So because of the approach and also with the unit test, we get these advantages, right? We have a really nice code that can be tested, that can be easily refactored, and we don't need to worry, because if we change anything and we do it wrongly, right? We make a mistake, everything will be catched in the unit test. And remember, unit tests are the fastest tests in the whole testing world. So we can run 10,000 tests and it will be a matter of a couple of seconds to see if your code is working. So this is a true magic here. You can test and you can see if your code is working right while you implement new features or refactor your code. This video was rather long. I hope you didn't get bored. But as you can see, we covered a lot of topics. We covered unit testing, we covered test-driven development approach, then we saw how to write tests in Magento 2 with the PHP unit framework. We also saw how to configure mocks and how to simulate behavior of different dependencies. And I believe with that knowledge, you can freely start writing your own unit tests. And if you have any questions, you can always ask me in the comment section. And also, what I would recommend is to invest some time in practicing this skill. So writing unit tests and writing the tests as a whole is really great experience, and I can really recommend that. It helped to save a lot of time. So maybe at the beginning you will see that you waste time on writing tests, but in the long run you will really see the benefit. I hope that this material was helpful, and thank you for watching. See you in the next video.